There are two major ways that we think that evolution of a species can occur: gradualism and punctuated equilibrium. Gradual is long periods of slow change, whereas punctuated equilibrium are short periods of relatively quick change, abrupt change. A species can evolve by only one of these or by both. We think that species with a shorter evolution evolved mostly by punctuated equilibrium, and those of the longer evolution evolved mostly by gradualism. If you look at this from the perspective of Darwin, he was mainly a gradualist. If you look at the pictures, you can see sort of the difference between gradualism and punctuated equilibrium in the shape of the phylogenetic trees. Looking at macroevolution overall, there are a couple of different patterns you need to be aware of. Adaptive radiation or divergent evolution are the same thing, just two words for the same thing, where species, a number of different species diverge or split off from a common ancestor. This occurs when over many generations, organisms whose ancestors were all the same species evolve a variety of characteristics which allow them to survive in different niches. So say when the dinosaurs died off, mammals had a divergent adaptive radiation to fill in all those empty niches. Convergent evolution is your coming together to look similar. This tends to produce analogous structures that are similar in appearance but have different evolutionary origins, such as the shape of the shark and the ichthyosaur and the dolphin and the penguin. They have converged in their shape, but they're from different ancestry. Usually this is due to similar environmental pressures. Coevolution is a little different. That's basically species evolving in response to each other. Two species living in close proximity, one change can affect changes in the other. So say, for example, the change in flower shapes and insects' mouth parts, things like that. Extinction is another large pattern of macroevolution. There's gradual extinction, which is very slow, steady. Speciation and gradual extinction, they tend to occur at approximately the same rate. So natural background gradual extinction, it's adaptable. The world is used to it. Species go extinct all the time. Mass extinctions are different. Catastrophic events, killing off huge amounts. And if you look at the diagram here, you can see there has been 5 known major mass extinctions, and we're currently working on the 6th. Scientific evidence underlies the theory of biological evolution, and an evolutionary theory has been developed that states that all forms of life on Earth are related because the ancestry of organisms can be traced back to a common origin. Evidence of the shared history is found in all aspects of living and fossil organisms, including physical features and the structures of proteins and the sequences found in RNA and DNA. But we have to use lots of different sources of evidence. That gives us a strong correlation, a strong relationship between these things, and gives us some very strong evidence for evolution. In Honors Bio, we're mainly going to focus on 4 fields of evidence. The first is the field of anatomy, or the study of the structures of organisms. We consider homologous structures as evidence of an evolutionary relationship. Organisms that have diverged from a common ancestor often have homologous structures or similar characteristics resulting from common ancestry. The greater the number of homologous structures, the more closely the species is related. Vestigial organs fall into this category. These are pieces or organs or bones or whatever that had an important function in an ancestor but no longer has a major function in the current organism. Vestigial organs of one species are often homologous with structures in a related species for which the structure has renamed functional. The study of the anatomy also reveals that species living in different locations under similar conditions may evolve similar structures, so we have to be careful with analogous things. But phylogenies can be constructed by assuming that anatomical differences increase with time. The greater the amount of similarity, the more recently a species is split. The accumulation of differences causes divergence, hence evolution. Sometimes it can be very hard to see similarities in adult organisms because the similarities only occur in development, in the embryo. So the field of embryology, or the study of the embryonic development of organisms, provides another piece of evidence here. Say mammals and fish don't look very related, but we all have gills during development. We have what's called the pharyngeal slits in mammals. That is what would become the gill. Those structures eventually formed the bones of our inner ear. So while they don't keep the same function anymore, they don't appear the same anymore, embryology can show us that we are indeed related. Biochemistry is some of the strongest evidence for evolution. We look at the sequences of DNA and amino acid and proteins, and the less the difference, the more likely they are to be related, the closer they are to related. Biochemistry gives us evidence when it can be very hard to see anatomical differences. Phylogenies can be constructed assuming that change occurs at a steady rate, and we use a molecular clock. If we know how often mutations occur on average, we can estimate how long ago a species split and use that to develop our relationships. So biochemistry is going to give us some of the strongest evidence in developing our phylogenetic trees. Paleontology gives us great evidence, especially for fossilized organisms. The fossil record provides valid evidence of life forms and environments. It shows us that species change over time. New layers cover older ones, creating a time record. I can use things like the half-life calculations, figure out how old. I can use transitional fossils to show those missing links between species. The biggest problem with the fossil record is that it's incomplete. Making fossils is actually a relatively rare process, and the fossil record is going to favor species that existed for a long period of time, that were in lots of places, and had hard parts that fossilize easily. Otherwise, they're not going to fossilize well. So paleontology has been a great source of evidence, but there's some inherent difficulties in getting that evidence. Phylogenetic trees are diagrams that show phylogeny, or the evolutionary history of a species of organisms. It classifies them into their major taxa, their major groups. If you remember the major classification systems, the dumb kids playing catch on freeway go splat: domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Phylogenetic trees are used to classify species in that order of descension. Some phylogenetic trees express the order of divergence. Some try to estimate time. The branch between humans and whales, an example in the bottom, has occurred relatively recently, but we split off from sharks way before. Speciation then is basically the branching of a phylogenetic tree.